I need to be honest with you about something most people in this space won't say out loud. I've been building food reserves for 6 years, not because I think the world is ending, but because I've watched enough disruptions up close to know that the people who are comfortable in a crisis are the ones who prepared quietly before anyone else was paying attention. Here's what I keep seeing that nobody is talking about. The supply chain problems everyone declared over in 2022 didn't disappear. They just changed shape. Instead of everything going empty at once, we're now seeing specific items vanish for 2 or 3 weeks, come back, then vanish again. Random, rotating, no announcement, no warning. I have a friend who works in regional distribution for a grocery chain. He told me something recently that stuck with me. He said certain SKUs no longer have reliable restock windows. The system just shows a blank where the date should be. Not delayed, just blank. He said it started with 2 or 3 items a month ago. Now it's closer to a dozen. That is a different kind of problem than a temporary shortage. It means the people managing the supply chain don't know when things are coming back either, and most people won't notice any of this until the shelf is empty at the worst possible moment. Number 8 on this list costs under $4 and has a shelf life longer than most of us will be alive. And number 3 is already showing that on and off disappearing pattern in multiple states right now. Hit subscribe before we get into this because this is the kind of real specific information I'm going to keep bringing you. No product placements, no sponsored prepper kits, just items you can buy at a normal store this week. Let's go. Item number 1 is canning lids. I know, sounds like something your grandmother worried about, but stay with me for 60 seconds because this one matters more than it looks. Regular mouth and wide mouth canning lids are getting harder to source every season. Here's the structural reason why. The manufacturing equipment used to produce them is decades old, well past its designed lifespan. Replacement parts are no longer made commercially, so factories are running on improvised repairs. Any breakdown stops production for weeks, sometimes longer. Last summer, in peak canning season, I called 6 stores within 30 miles of me looking for wide mouth lids. 2 had none at all. 3 had 1 or 2 boxes. 1 had plenty, but only the size I didn't need. A box that cost $3 2 years ago is now $7 or $8 when you can find one. Here's the thing most people miss. You don't need to be a canner to need these. They seal mason jars for dry goods storage. Flour, rice, salt, oats, airtight, stackable, reusable. A sealed mason jar is one of the best long-term storage containers you can use, and without lids, it's just a glass jar. And think about this angle. If you're storing food for any length of time, eventually you're going to open containers and reseal them. Every time you do that without a good lid, you're exposing your food to humidity and pests. A bad lid on a bucket of flour can turn a 2-year supply into a 6-month supply. In any kind of disruption economy, a box of lids is a genuinely useful trade item. Someone who wants to preserve their garden harvest but can't find lids will pay serious value for them. I keep a supply of 200 in a single drawer. They take up almost no space. Buy them now while they're still findable at a reasonable price. Item number 2 is lentils, not the expensive green variety at specialty stores. Plain brown or red lentils from the bulk bin, about $2 a pound, sometimes less. Here's the thing that separates lentils from every other protein source in this category. They cook in 15 minutes with 0 soaking. Beans need hours of prep time. In any situation where fuel is limited or time is short, that difference is enormous. If you're cooking on a camp stove with a limited propane supply, 15 minutes versus 2 hours is not a small thing. That's the difference between hot food for a week and hot food for a day. Red lentils break down completely and thicken into a filling soup. Brown lentils hold their shape and work as a ground meat substitute in almost anything. 1 pound gives you significant protein per batch and more fiber than nearly any other shelf-stable food at this price point. Here's a practical use most people overlook. Red lentils dissolved into a soup or stew make thin broth into something thick and satisfying. You can take a bouillon cube, some water, and half a cup of red lentils, and in 20 minutes you have a filling meal. That skill is worth more than most expensive gear. Store them sealed in a food-grade bucket with an oxygen absorber, and they last 30 years. I have a bucket I sealed in 2019. Opened a small portion last month to test it. Perfect. No off smell, no bugs, nothing. And here's exactly why this item survives every panic buy. When things go sideways, people sprint to the canned goods aisle. The bulk bins sit completely untouched. I have never once seen lentils sold out. Not in 2020. Not during any disruption since. That consistent availability is itself a strategic advantage you can plan around. Item number 3 is in your cleaning aisle right now. White distilled vinegar. Plain gallon jugs. And this is the item I mentioned is already showing that warning pattern in multiple states. In stock 1 week, completely gone the next, back the week after. Here's why the supply is less stable than it looks. Most white vinegar is produced from corn. Right now, corn is being increasingly redirected toward ethanol production, while weather-related harvest pressure continues. The production chain is getting squeezed from both ends simultaneously, and the output is getting less predictable every quarter. The on and off availability pattern is the early warning sign. It's what shows up before a shortage becomes permanent. I've watched this pattern with several items over the years. It always starts with randomness, then the randomness gets longer, and the restocks get shorter. Vinegar is a preservative, a disinfectant, a laundry treatment, and a cleaning agent in a single jug. You can pickle vegetables and make them shelf-stable for months without refrigeration. The acidity inhibits bacterial growth, which is why vinegar itself keeps indefinitely. Here's something most people don't realize about the disinfectant angle. A 50-50 mix of white vinegar and water in a spray bottle kills a significant range of household bacteria on contact. In a situation where store-bought cleaners are unavailable, this is your backup. 1 gallon of vinegar gives you multiple gallons of effective cleaning solution. $3 a gallon. Lasts forever. I keep a serious supply on hand and rotate through it constantly in regular cooking and cleaning. Pickling, cleaning, laundry, water treatment. The applications stack up fast. Item number 4 is one most people have genuinely never heard of. TVP, Textured Vegetable Protein. Before you tune out, give me 1 minute. This is not about diet preference. This is pure survival math. 1 pound of dry TVP rehydrates to 4 pounds of usable protein. A 5-pound bag costs roughly $9. That gives you 20 pounds of cooked protein for less than $10. Freeze-dried meat kits run $200 for maybe 8 servings. Do the math yourself. 2 winters ago, a storm knocked out our power for over a week. The freezer was gone by day 4. Everything in it was a loss. But I had TVP in the pantry, and my family ate normally for the rest of the outage. Chili, pasta sauce, tacos. Nobody complained, nobody could tell. Here's exactly how to use it. 1 cup dry TVP, 1 cup boiling water, wait 5 minutes. It absorbs whatever seasoning you add completely. Season it like taco meat, it tastes like taco meat. Season it like bolognese, it tastes like bolognese. The texture after rehydration is genuinely similar to cooked ground meat, which is why it works so well mixed into dishes where the protein is one component among many. Here's the angle that most people miss on this one. TVP is also a budget multiplier for normal cooking right now, before any crisis. Mix half TVP and half ground beef in any recipe. You just cut your meat cost in half and nobody at the table will notice. I've been doing this for years. It's not a survival compromise. It's just smart. Stored in a food-grade bucket with an oxygen absorber, it lasts 30 years. And because most people have simply never heard of it, it sits in bulk sections completely ignored during every panic buy. It was fully stocked during 2020 while canned tuna shelves were empty. That's not a coincidence. That's your advantage. Item number 5 is one people assume they have covered. Salt. They usually don't. Here's the number that reframes this. The human body needs roughly 500 milligrams of sodium per day just to maintain basic function. Muscle contractions, nerve signals, fluid balance. Without it, things go wrong fast. Work out the math for a family of 4 over a year, and you're talking about a significant quantity just for survival, before you account for cooking and food preservation. Salt production depends on mines and evaporation flats. Climate disruption, specifically the alternating floods and droughts that have become more frequent, interferes with both. There are no dramatic headlines about it, but production slowdowns are documented and prices have been quietly climbing. Here's what makes salt uniquely valuable beyond just seasoning. It is the original preservation technology. Before refrigeration, before canning, salt was how humanity kept food edible. Dry salted meat and fish can last months without any other treatment. Vegetables packed in salt brine stay edible for an entire winter. That technology still works perfectly and requires nothing except salt and time. And here's the compounding value. Every item on this list becomes more useful when you have enough salt. Lentils taste better. TVP actually tastes like something. Pickled vegetables become a real food group. Salt is the ingredient that makes every other ingredient work. 100 pounds of canning salt from a wholesale supplier costs around $20. That is a multi-year supply for your household, and it functions as a serious trade commodity if things get difficult. Salt never expires. A bag from 50 years ago works identically to a bag from last week. Don't overlook it because it seems basic. Basic is exactly why it's irreplaceable. Item number 6 blindsided a lot of people in early 2020. Yeast. Dry active yeast was gone from store shelves for nearly 6 months. People who thought they had adequate food supplies suddenly realized they couldn't bake anything. The entire baking aisle was fully stocked. Just no yeast anywhere. The reason this happens is structural. Yeast production is concentrated in a very small number of large industrial facilities. A disruption at 1 or 2 plants creates a national shortage almost immediately. There is almost no buffer inventory in the system because yeast has a limited shelf life in commercial packaging and retailers don't overorder it. Dry active yeast lasts 2 years at room temperature. Vacuum sealed in a freezer, it extends to 10 years or more. I bought a bulk quantity and vacuum sealed it in small individual portions, so I'm not exposing the whole supply every time I open one. Here's something worth knowing about the practical side of this. Yeast isn't just for bread. It's for pizza dough, flatbreads, rolls, pancakes, any leavened dough. When you have a stockpile of flour and grains, but no way to make them into real food, yeast is the bridge. The psychological difference between eating crackers every day and eating actual bread is significant when you're under stress for weeks at a time. But here's the longer-term play. Learn to maintain a sourdough starter. Wild yeast, fed with flour and water once a week, kept alive indefinitely. People have maintained the same starter for decades. If packaged yeast disappears again, a starter keeps working regardless. It takes about 7 days to build one from scratch using just flour and water. Start one now so you have the skill before you need it. Item number 7 is something everyone has and almost nobody stockpiles properly. Cooking oil. Vegetable or canola oil, a gallon jug for about $10. Here is the nutritional fact that changes how you think about this. Fat delivers 9 calories per gram. Protein and carbohydrates deliver 4. That means oil is more than twice as calorie dense as anything else you can stockpile by weight. In a rationing scenario, fat is what keeps you functional. It is not optional. Your body cannot absorb fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K, without dietary fat. A diet of rice and lentils alone without adequate fat will leave you depleted within weeks regardless of total calorie count. Beyond nutrition, oil makes difficult food tolerable. That matters more than people admit. Food monotony is a documented psychological problem in extended crisis situations. People stop eating not because food is unavailable, but because they cannot face another plain bowl. A tablespoon of oil in a pan changes the texture, the smell, the experience of the same ingredients completely. Sealed oil lasts about 2 years before rancidity becomes a serious issue. I keep 3 gallons rotating through regular cooking, replacing each one as I use it so the supply stays fresh. Store it away from heat and direct light. Both accelerate the breakdown. Here's a secondary use most people never think about. In a power-down situation, cooking oil can be burned in a simple wick lamp for emergency light. It's not efficient, but it works. A small dish of oil with a cloth wick gives you enough light to navigate a room safely. That dual utility, food and emergency light, makes it even more valuable per dollar than it already is. Panic buyers skip oil because it's heavy and unglamorous. That's exactly why it's still on the shelf when everything else is gone. Item number 8 is something immigrant communities have quietly relied on for generations. Bouillon cubes. Not the name brand single-serving packets. the large bulk containers you find at Hispanic or Asian grocery markets. A tub of 200 cubes for under $4. Each cube makes a cup of broth. That's 200 cups of flavor for less than the cost of a coffee. Here's the survival value that almost never gets mentioned. Food monotony breaks people psychologically before hunger ever does. In any long disruption, eating plain rice or plain lentils every single day erodes morale in ways that are hard to describe until you've experienced it. But rice cooked in chicken bouillon is a completely different meal. Same ingredients, completely different experience. That psychological difference is not a luxury. It's what keeps people functional and cooperative under stress. I have cubes in my pantry that I bought 4 years ago and opened last week to check. Perfect. They don't spoil because they're essentially compressed salt and dried vegetables. Shelf-stable, almost by definition. Drop one into your rice while it cooks. Drop one into your beans. Drop one into a pot of hot water with whatever vegetables you have, and you have soup in 10 minutes. One cube, one step, completely different result. Here's another angle. In a situation where you need to stretch small amounts of protein further, bouillon changes the equation. A single chicken bouillon cube in a pot of plain water with lentils and salt tastes like a real chicken soup. Your brain registers it as a full meal. That's not a small thing when resources are tight and stress is high. When shortages hit, people race to buy MREs and freeze-dried meal kits. The $4 flavor solution sitting right next to the regular soup goes completely untouched. That's your window. Item number 9 is something your grandparents trusted and most modern preppers have written off unfairly. Powdered milk, not the small overpriced box in the baking section. Bulk instant non-fat dry milk. About $18 for a 5-pound bag that makes around 6 gallons of milk. Here's what most people miss. You almost never drink it straight. You use it in cooking. Mashed potatoes, mac and cheese, baking, coffee creamer, oatmeal. It dissolves completely, and you genuinely cannot taste it in finished food. If someone told you there was powdered milk in the dish you were eating, you wouldn't believe them. Last winter we had a stretch of bad ice storms, and I didn't get to a store for 12 days. By day 5, the fresh milk was gone, but every evening I made hot cocoa for my kids with powdered milk and a little honey. They didn't feel like anything was wrong. They felt like it was a normal evening. That sense of normalcy in a stressful situation is worth more than the $18, because normalcy is what keeps kids calm and cooperative when everything around them is disrupted. Here's the nutritional angle that makes this irreplaceable. Powdered milk provides calcium, vitamin D, and complete protein. 3 nutrients that are almost impossible to get from typical shelf-stable foods. Canned goods, rice, beans, lentils, none of them give you calcium or vitamin D in meaningful amounts. In any prolonged disruption, deficiency problems start appearing before starvation does. Children especially. This is cheap, simple, direct insurance against that. Sealed in a container, it lasts 25 years. Most people tried the cheap grocery store version once, found it unpleasant, and never went back. The bulk instant variety is genuinely different in taste and texture. Don't judge it by the baking aisle box. Item number 10 is something everyone knows they need and almost nobody has enough of: batteries. AA and AAA, alkaline batteries specifically. Battery production is concentrated in a small number of countries, and raw material costs have been climbing steadily for 2 years. A multi-pack that cost $6 in 2022 is now $9 or $10. And that trend is not reversing. In any extended power outage, batteries are your lifeline. Flashlights, radios, medical devices, kids' toys that keep small children calm. Everything runs on them. Think about what you actually rely on daily that takes batteries, and then think about how long your current supply would last if the grid went down for 2 weeks. Buy alkaline for long-term storage. Not rechargeable. Rechargeable batteries self-discharge over time, even when you're not using them. Pull a rechargeable battery off the shelf after 6 months of storage, and it may have 30% of its original capacity. Pull an alkaline off the shelf after 5 years, and it works at full power. For emergencies, alkaline is the only answer. I keep a substantial supply in the original packaging in a cool, dry interior location. Heat is the main enemy of battery shelf life, so the garage and the attic are the wrong places. A closet shelf inside the house is ideal. Here is the approach that actually works without feeling painful. Every time you go to the store, put 1 pack of batteries in the cart. 1. In 6 months, you will have a real supply without ever noticing the expense. It spreads the cost so gradually, you won't feel it. And the result is a stockpile that could last your household through a serious extended outage. Beyond personal use, batteries in an outage become an immediate trade commodity. People who need them for medical devices or communication will pay serious value for them. The person with a working flashlight and a spare set of batteries has something real to offer. Item number 11 is going to surprise some people. Instant coffee. I know the reaction. But hear me out, because this is not about taste. Caffeine is a functional tool. It keeps you alert when stress is high and sleep is disrupted. In a crisis that stretches over days or weeks, staying functional and keeping your thinking clear is not optional. It's how you make good decisions when the decisions matter most. It's how you stay patient with your kids at the end of a hard day when everything is harder than normal. Instant coffee specifically has 3 advantages that nothing else matches for this purpose. A sealed jar lasts up to 20 years, far longer than ground coffee, which goes stale in weeks. It requires 0 equipment, no filters, no brewing time, no electricity, just hot water or cold water if that's all you have. And it is extraordinarily cheap per serving. A large jar contains roughly 100 cups for $8, 8 cents per serving. I keep 10 jars in storage. That's a year of daily coffee and significant surplus for trading. Here's why trading specifically matters. In every documented economic disruption or prolonged crisis, small comfort items become hard currency. People who have enough food will still trade significant value for something that makes daily life feel human again. Coffee is near the top of that list. The trading value of a jar of instant coffee in a genuine prolonged disruption is multiple times its store price, and that gap widens the longer the disruption lasts, and the supply picture is genuinely getting tighter. Brazil produces roughly a third of the world's coffee and had serious crop failures last year due to drought and unusual cold. Coffee plants take 3 to 5 years from planting to reach full production. Even if conditions normalize completely today, supply pressure is locked in for years. The price trajectory on coffee is not going down. The jars are still $8 right now. That window will not stay open indefinitely. We just covered 11 items that are quietly becoming harder to find, more expensive, or both. Here is what to do right now. Don't wait for the mainstream news to cover this. By the time shortages make headlines, these items are gone from shelves within a day. That cycle repeats every single time, and the people who wait for the announcement are always the ones left empty-handed. Don't try to buy everything at once. Pick 3 items from this list and go get them this week. Just 3. Build your reserve one step at a time, and in 3 months, you'll have a serious stockpile without ever feeling the cost. The other thing I want you to think about is rotation. A stockpile that sits untouched for years is a gamble. The right approach is to buy what you actually use what you store, and replace what you use. That way, your supplies stay fresh, you know exactly what you have, and you never have to face an expiration date problem. If this was useful, hit like and share it with someone who keeps meaning to prepare but hasn't started yet. Your neighbor, your sister, someone in your circle who you know would want this information. Subscribe, because I'm going to keep making exactly this kind of content, specific products, real numbers, actual steps you can take this week. The goal is not to scare you. The goal is to make sure that when something happens, and disruptions do happen, that's not fear-mongering, that's just history. You're the person who already has what you need. See you in the next one.